So I wanted to create this video a little bit to talk about the coronavirus, not essentially coronavirus, but like some system dynamics that are governing um, this coronavirus outbreak. First thing to note and disclaimer that I'm not a medical professional or I don't have any formal education in virology or anything like that. I'm just using the numbers that have been shared online and through some other research. So I'm not here to kind of give any advice, and I just want to kind of go through the system dynamics that are kind of governing the loop. So I, the first thing is like there are two main systematical phenomenon that are happening with the coronavirus that makes it like so dangerous. The first one is reinforcing feedback loop, and the second one is delays. So let's start diving into like the reinforcing feedback loops. So essentially, this means this is kind of also known as like positive feedback loop, is like ability of a matter or system to kind of grow based on its previous growth rates. So essentially, if something is growing, then it has like more ability to grow even further. Example for this is like interest rates in your bank account. So essentially, if you have, I don't know, $10,000 and you have 10% interest rate, then the next month you're going to have $11,000. Then next 10% is not going to be $1,000, it's going to be $1,100. So essentially, like this is creating like the more you grow, the more ability you have to grow. um, so this virus is really dangerous because it has exponential function of growth. So essentially, based on the research, it says that the virus has ability to double the number of infected people in 3 days. So essentially, if today there's only one person in the world that's infected, in 3 days it's going to be three. And the problem with these like exponential functions and like this reinforcing feedback loop is that we really are not good at comprehending how this will work out. So when I was like trying to figure out the data for this video, I wanted to use like simple examples. So we start with one, and then like after 30 days, if every 3 days we double, I kind of like that means that in 30 days we need to double by 30 10 times. So then I was like thinking, okay, so this will probably end up around 30. But if you kind of use the numbers as I did here, essentially if you have one case today, in 30 days with the doubling rate, it will reach 1,000 people. So like this is how it looks like. So in first 7 days you think like nothing is happening, like you just have like handful of people, like four people are infected. It's like nothing, like nothing's gonna happen. But if the same growth rate continues for a full month, you're gonna have 1,000 cases by the end of the month after just like having one single infected person. And like that's even more wild if you look at the second month. So second month you see the same graph, but like the fact that you're starting with 1,000 cases and then you're doubling them every 3 days means you end up with 1 million people. So essentially you have one day and after 60 days you're gonna have 1 million people infected. Like that's really crazy growth and like really crazy amount of infected people if it goes like that. Obviously, like the number that virus is spreading is dependent on like various different factors, which I'm not going to go into. But just like this system dynamic of having this reinforcing feedback loop that's just like feeding out of itself, it's really hard to comprehend for people and decision makers. So that's why most of the people say that it's just a flu. It might be a flu, but it's spreading so fast that it's much more dangerous than a flu. Um, so yeah, the second thing about the this virus is the delay. So delay in system dynamics is time that goes between like when person gets infected between the time when they start showing the symptoms. So this is called, I think, incubation period for diseases. And there have been like reports that average incubation period is between um, 5 to 14 days. So you might be infected with a virus, and then for 14 days, like you don't have any symptoms, but you still have the ability to spread this virus. So like you might be totally fine, like and person anybody might be completely fine, but they've got virus in themselves, which is kind of starting to build the illness inside you, and you still have the ability to spread this virus. You still have the ability to kind of move the number of cases that are happening. And this delay is particularly difficult for like governments or any agencies to kind of make big decisions as to like what are the solutions, what can we do about what's happening. So I have this graph of like timeline of events that happened in yeah, in the Hubei region of China, where the initial outbreak happened. So there have been it's kind of they think that first case appeared at like December 8th, and then as you mentioned, as we mentioned before, like this is like how the exponential function is working. So you think there's nothing happening in first like 20-30 days, and then it starts to explode, um, as we've seen previously. So the what here this graph is showing is that the gray columns are when when like the scientists estimated that people got infected with the virus, and the yellow one is the date of diagnosis. So essentially when somebody came into the clinic and they were tested for virus and they were identified positive. So the thing that you can see right here is like this delay, that this is the amount of people that were actually infected. Once again, this is like an estimate. This is not like a fact. This is an estimate how many people were infected, and this is the official confirmed cases by the government. Also, like this is Chinese data, so I have no idea how credible this data is and how much like they wanted to skew the data towards their benefit. But like it seems totally possible because of what we're seeing in Italy and South Korea as well. So this is the thing that you have when you start reporting cases. So you will actually have much more people that are actually infected versus the number of people that So, for example, I think you can see the coronavirus was infected on January 7th, and this is like when they started. To be understand that there's like some kind of threat, and the first tests were available on January 13th. So they started testing on January 13th, and then when you take a look at this is like when official cases started exploding on January 20th. This is when they had enough kits available to understand how many people were actually contained. So why this is important is that you have like this delay between like this is date when people were contained or infected, and this is when they were actually diagnosed with the disease. So like this is between January 21st and 28th. So like this is 7-day delay. So if you report that okay, this person has a virus, that means they had 7 days to spread virus all across like whatever their social connections were happening. So that's why any official case number, so like we have 20 people that have coronavirus, you have to always look back like 7 days ago. Like they all probably like 7 to 14 days ago got infected. So that means that actual case on this number of cases on this date is probably much higher due to like all the interactions they made with people prior to that. And like this delay is really difficult because you need to make a decision based on like data that you don't have. So let's take a look at the actual Chinese stats from like world meters. So on January 22nd, they reported 500 cases. So like they on that day they reported 500 cases, total cases. So that's January 22nd, and on January 23rd they shut down the city completely, and on January 24th they completely shut down 15 more cities in this region. So essentially, this means that the government needs to make a decision based on 800 or 500 cases they have. So they don't know exactly what's their exposure, but they need to make a decision. So this is like extremely difficult, which I think one of the benefits of China being like a communist country is giving them this benefit so they can make this decision without data, without explaining themselves. And this is much more difficult, becoming much more difficult in Western countries, as we can see that like Italy shut down the whole country on I think February or even late early March, when the official number of cases was much higher than in China. So this kind of delay presents like huge problem for governments and authorities to make a decision because they don't have the data of like what is the actual amount of people that were infected with the virus. I also read this thread by one American entrepreneur, and he's also pointing out to the same thing that this math is actually the exponential growth is something to be worried about, and that the exponential growth, the only way to kind of stop this exponential growth is by social distancing, which is a little bit of a problem because this always feels like an overreaction because you're saying I'm not gonna have any social contacts, and people said like you're crazy, like there's only 10 people that are infected, but this is the only way to kind of contain the virus because it needs to be transmitted from person to person. And the second thing is the hygiene that some researchers state that virus can stay on the metal surfaces, so soap and alcohol sanitizers are effective to kill the virus. So yeah, hopefully this kind of makes sense to you that those system dynamics where something that is not completely intuitive to us, but it has caused this like pandemic of the virus and the ability of the virus to spread so quickly. Yeah, hopefully this was kind of helpful to you, and stay safe out there. Try not to get too much contact with anybody else these days, and do your best to keep best hygiene, and hopefully we'll be able to learn something out of this episode later on.